Deadeye 29 here. Single speed bike from Bikesdirect. $350. Bought this in January. It arrived in late January. Had it for about 3 months. When I bought the bike, it was on pre-order, so we got it around late January, and I just looked today and it's sold out, or they need to order another batch. This bike is the 29-inch single speed. It has 2.35-inch tires on it, and the Deadeye also came with a 27.5-inch version. Basically your 650B version of the bike. And because it was a smaller tire, you also had the benefit of being able to go wider. So those had, I think, 2.8-inch width tires. We got about half an inch more on that bike. Had some commentary on that unboxing video, initial setup. We tore some of the parts as it was assembled in the box, took it apart even further to make sure it was assembled correctly and nicely so far as the bottom bracket and the headset, and was pleasantly surprised. Found out that the bottom bracket was sealed, VP Industries sealed bottom bracket. Found out that the headset was not sealed, but that everything was greased okay and installed correctly, which is a concern with some of the mail order type bike delivery outfits. You hear horror stories about there not being any lube anywhere, any grease anywhere in the entire bike, and then people ride them as is, and it's bad news. So we found that it was a good bike, basically. Certainly budget when you look at the brakes, some no-name parts on it. But some of the comments that we got from that previous video was like, is this a good bike to turn into a townie, turn into a clunker? Is this a bike that you'd be okay with if you were riding around with the kids, things like that? Didn't want to have your $2,000 bike just going around to get ice cream. So the answer is absolutely. This is a great candidate for that type of application, and wanted to show some of the changes that I've done. I want to emphasize though that this bike, as it was perfectly fine riding out of the box. So received it in the winter. One of the first changes, I put some studded tires, some Schwalbe Ice Spiker Pro, slightly narrower, 2.25 inch width, but the tires and the knobs were really much knobbier than these tires from the Aerosyn that you see here, and those work just fine. These are Aerosyn tires. I had to look up the brand. It's not something you can buy a bunch of them, so it is more of a budget tire for sure. Although when I was looking at their studded tires, those were really expensive. So I don't know totally the deal on Aerosyn, but these feel like just fine tires. They feel like I would have no problem riding these for hundreds of miles, and I will indeed see if they last for hundreds of miles. But if you're looking at like a big box budget tire, you're going to feel that kind of hard plasticky feel out of the materials, and these do not feel that way at all. These feel pretty close to any other mid to high range tire. They're light enough, they're supple, and if they cost less, then I would say go with these tires if you can find them. So I do have some tires that are about 50 millimeters with less tread that I may consider swapping out, especially if I'm going really long distance and I think somehow I need to have more supple or lighter weight tires. and I need to conserve every ounce of energy I have. But these are great tires, especially for just going around town, jumping curves at full speed, and otherwise crushed limestone and gravel applications, which is what we're doing here. So the bike is perfectly rideable as is, out of the box. It has a lot of features though that drew me to the bike to begin with. First of all, the width of the tires and the clearance, the reliability and uniqueness, I guess, of a single speed and the function that serves. And then all the braze-on points. The front fork has 3 points where you can mount all your doodads, whether it's extra lights, you want to free up space here in your handlebar, so you put your lights here, put a water bottle here, I put a rack here. But the bike was perfectly rideable. A lot of these parts that I added to it were simply because I enjoy bicycling and I enjoy the parts, and I enjoy customizing it to some extent, and I already had the parts in my parts bin, or I sell a bike and take off the good stuff and I'm waiting to use it again. You know how it goes in that way. But what I did was I didn't like the flat bars all that much. I like a Jones bar and I like a drop bar, and a drop bar seems to me to be an alt bar in of itself, especially these gravel bars. The problem that so many people have are that the drop bars are for racing and the stem is too low, and so then you don't get to take advantage of all the multi-hand positions that you have with a drop bar, which tells me that a drop bar is an alt bar in of itself. It's just they're too low. So these are raised up high with the Velo orange, wait for the mispronunciation, Signe stem, like a gooseneck. I've had that on a few bikes, didn't really find the right fit for those bikes, but it works pretty well here. As you can see, it raises up the handlebars, so even though they're drop bars, they're basically at the level of a flat bar would be on this bike with a shorter stem. And so in that way, suddenly your drop bars are becoming like a swept back towny bike, and then you have your flat bars here, and you have your brake hood levers here. So you have multiple hand positions, and it's comfortable this way too. One of the significant changes that I did make on this bike, and that are reflected here for sure, when I switched to drop bars, I needed to use different brake levers, and for whatever reason, the bike industry wanting to make extra money, the brake cables are different on the ends from your flat bar brakes to road or drop bar type levers. So when you look here, it's going to be hard to see maybe, but this cylindrical section where the cable actually connects to the brake is shaped differently. Probably so it's based on horizontal versus vertical and the forces on your cables. But what it meant for me was I needed to buy new brake cables to fit my different brake levers. And while I was doing that, and since we had these basically $25 Aries mechanical disc brake calipers, wanted to see if we could improve the functionality, and the wisdom is that you can do so if you are using different types of brake cable housing. So this is compressionless brake housing, and it does make a difference. So regular brakes or compressioned brake cables are more of a metal coil. If you peeled off the rubber, you would see segmented metal coil, and this looks more like fiber, long strands of metal fiber going all the way along. So they are less flexible, they don't curve as easily, you have to wrestle with it. I definitely had to finesse it when it came through some of these curves. But what happens with the compressionless brake cables is that you have a lot more finesse and ability to modulate your brakes. So in that way, they feel like higher end mechanical disc brakes or even hydraulic. And these are not hydraulic. You don't have to worry about the fluids and mechanical maintenance associated with that, and little air bubbles or anything like that. But I do feel that changing the brake cable housing to compressionless in this application vastly improved the braking. So before, as it is out of the box, you're going to stop quick, it's going to stop hard, you'll have no problem stopping. It's just that, if anything, you might stop way quicker and more abruptly than what you had wanted or had anticipated. With the compressionless brake housing that I got from Origin 8, it makes it so much more modulable, being able to modulate it and finesse it. So I have that with drop bars from Velo Orange, also the Dodge Far bar, just a wider bar. The stock flat bars were really wide, actually, to the extent that I had to kind of wrestle with it into certain doorways, certain pathways. But these are wide enough. Certainly it's a flared, shallow drop, and it's very comfortable because of all that. I had this bar tape. This is old school leather with almost zero padding, so wouldn't really recommend that for gravel, but certainly the Drury bar ends here, very comfortable. Little place here to rest your hands, also comfortable. So overall, very comfortable change. I had this front rack by Radworks, or Raidworks, very Viking, Minnesota oriented bike brand and accessories. Had that laying around, and I'll probably put a small bag on there. But certainly, as you can see, there's already plenty of space to put whatever you want. And with these 3 mounting brackets, it was a relative breeze to put on a front rack, and that's always a problem. Racks are always a problem with your bikes because there's so many different bikes, so many different racks, and compatibility is an issue. With that, I also have this rear rack, not as cool or fancy, Ibera, and you can put 2 saddlebags on there, or panniers, and there's also a top bag that I don't use. And so with going around town, this is what I'm finding, and just works really well. I usually only have 1 bag on here because when I'm getting on the bike, I swing my leg over here and dismount, and I don't need that much storage anyways for most of the time. So that's what I have. Blackburn frame bag. That's expandable. It's currently in the expand state, and you can zip it up and then just have it this far up, give you some more room. There is a water bottle brace here, water bottle mount here. Probably have 2 here on the fork for water bottles as well that I'll be utilizing. And that is relatively easy to grab as well. And beyond that, pedals and the seat were the last changes. I do have these accessory mounts also from Origin 8. It just gives you another space to put things on. With the seat, I put on the Brooks Flyer. It's got springs on it, and it does make a big difference. This saddle is still being broken in, but I have a number of Brooks saddles, some 6, 7, 8 years old, and they just get more and more comfortable. You have to keep them out of the rain. Serious saturating rain. Most rains are just fine, but you don't want the leather to get saturated. But there's seat covers that work fine also. Springs make a big difference also. My other Brooks don't have springs, but if you put your hand on here, it's going to feel firm. So a lot of people are shying away from Brooks because of the perception that they're not comfortable, the reality that they are heavier, and then also the price. Especially if you're looking at a $350 bike, you may wonder, why are we going to spend $90 to $190 for a Brooks saddle? But all these parts are either stuff that you already have, or kind of the fun of having that disparity between a really cheap bike frame and then expensive accessories or modifications that you put on the bike. Absolutely, like I said, not needed, and it's a rideable bike out of the box. If you look at all these parts, you've probably doubled the price easily. And last change, completely unnecessary also, these are MKS Always platform pedals. Speaking of sealed, these things spin for such a long time. If the wind catches them right, they'll just spin. So they're very smooth, very reliable. And the feature that I love about these particular MKS brakes are that they're quick release. And that's actually usually a two-handed job, but you can take these out. And this part, the mounting accessory, you can buy multiple sets of these and put them on all your bikes, and if you are patient enough, you just swap your pedals to whatever bike you happen to be riding. And so that's kind of fun. And it's also a security feature. So you have your bike locked up, and something else you can do is you can just take the pedals off. And that way, if they're going to steal your bike, you can't really prevent it, but this way they're going to have to walk the bike to where they're going as opposed to riding it, or they need to throw it onto a truck or a van and drive off. So this is the bike in its maybe not final form, but its initial form after taking it out of the box and playing around with it. It's quite enjoyable. I've ridden about, I'd say 60 miles on it so far over the last 3 months. And as it gets warmer here in the Midwest, I'll be taking it out for much longer rides. Single speed, so not really looking at speed as the primary goal, but definitely need it to be comfortable when I'm going longer distances, and I think all these changes have definitely done that. Thanks for watching.